Welcome down the rabbit hole. I'm your host, John Fitzgerald, and my guest today is Tyler Engle of Bassforge. If you've never seen Bassforge, you have to go check out the YouTube or the Instagram or the TikTok. He posts amazing content. It'll blow your mind. It'll make you think a whole new way. Until then, he's going to be talking to us about his travels overseas, Egypt, Jordan, and all the other information that he's acquired to compile into his new book, the CODEX ESOTERICA. Let's dive in.
I'm positive that you are surprised that a golfer reached out to you to say, hey, we should have this conversation.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah.
dude, Tyler, okay, so you're into a little bit of everything that I'm into, but I'm more of a bit into like the biophysical area rather than like the metaphysical area. How did you go from a computer engineer to an audio engineer, music producer, and then the founder of Bassforge, which now you're an author of what, 6 different books?
Yeah, it's the journey.
Yeah. How did this start?
So I went to school for computer engineering in Wichita, Kansas, and I got a bachelor's in computer engineering with a minor in physics and mathematics, and I went into data storage. Ran automation for data storage for a couple of years, which was kind of soul crushing. And then I wanted to go off and do my own thing. I was always into business, so I started a cleaning service, mostly windows, and we did high rise. So I was hanging off side of buildings, cleaning windows, and made really good money. And I had a lot of time to listen to a lot of books, and so I started getting into like self-help really hard. And once I got into that, I was when you're in that space, you eventually end up in like this weird esoteric, like metaphysical space. Like you can only go so far down in self-help before you start going into like psychology stuff. And I hit the esoteric level pretty hard. Like just got into Manly P. Hall. He was a self-help dude, but he was a 33rd degree Freemason. And I was like, okay, well, he's got all the info. Started digging into that, and kind of opened a lot of doors to the hidden knowledge that you don't really get like taught in school. And then he kept diving, and then it's all one rabbit hole. Once you get to the very bottom, you realize it all came out of like the ancient cultures, like Egypt and India, places like that. And so that kind of ignited my spiritual curiosity, I guess. And when I started getting into that, that's when I started noticing like the similarities between components of a computer and like a temple and all this stuff. And so I started piecing those things.
That's what like blew my mind when I saw your page. I was just like, dude, finally somebody that's obviously far more intelligent than me that can freaking decode some of this shit. Thank God.
That was the fun part for me too, because I was like, there's no way that the geometry and like the ratios and stuff are adding up in those temples for no reason or for decorative purposes. So start formulating some theories, because we work with electromagnetism, but so does the mind, so does the body. Everything works in the physical world. That's what does all the work. So I was like, okay, well, maybe they're manipulating something, because there's always been the like pyramid power plant theories and stuff like that, but I wanted to tackle it from like a new angle. I'm not saying that those are wrong in any way, but I wanted like a new perspective. I don't think anyone was touching on like the planet as a whole. Like you'd focus on maybe Egypt or Mesoamerica, but no one was focusing on how they could all possibly be connected, because they all share the same kind of geometric code. And so if that has something to do with maybe the planet or how it interacts with human consciousness or biological life, maybe that's a clue to that. And from what I've seen with my researches is that they're all one thing. Like they're all whatever it is whether it's life or plants or celestial mechanics. It's all one thing. It has to be one thing, because we're in this. And so connecting all of that became an obsession of mine, and that's really what my page is taking these things that are kind of wildly separate from each other and making them one thing, because it is. So
that's
kind of the bridge.
I was watching a podcast, your podcast, which I was unaware of until 4 or 5 days ago. with your friend, and you guys were talking about a specific type of like kind of all-encompassing scientific theory, um, which in my field is missing completely. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of cadaver science and whatever, but um, it's crazy that I've never seen anybody make the computer chip layout tie one time. And I mean, we've followed Graham Hancock for 10 years or
Yeah.
so, and I've seen tons of temple things, but the temple tech that YouTube video that you went into blew my gasket, right?
Yeah.
So are you the first one? Did someone teach you that, or are you just a computer nerd that was like microchip?
I don't want to say I'm the first. I heard the idea like kind of batted around a little bit, but no one could accurately. They said they pointed out resemblances before. I've seen those, but no one really tied the components to it. Like it's one thing to just say this thing looks like this other thing. You can do that with pretty much anything in reality, but mapping the function to it and maybe analyzing the materials and the composition of those and seeing how they interact with each other, that's an entirely different thing that most people can't do unless you have a background in computer engineering. There's very specific materials that go into phones and everything that we use, and if you don't know that, then it's just going to be a very fun idea. But having my background, I think, gave a little more clarity to that. So I don't want to take full credit for it, because I mean the theory of like a planetary grid has been around for a while, but it's been in a very spiritual space, and it's kind of scared a lot of people off. And I think I brought some new people into the fold because I'm putting a little more science behind it, and that was my goal with the page, is to ground those concepts in reality, because they are very fun to explore and they're very meaningful to a lot of people. And if you can give that more of a concrete anchor, I think that's kind of what a lot of people are missing and lacking in their spiritual conscious beliefs as well. So I think it really does help kind of get people in without going off the deep end and being in the crazy camp.
I'm pumped to see you and the people that you've been mentioning, like hang on, I had to write these down actually. Dale Pond,
Yeah.
and the whole vibrations that he was going through, and then we're talking into the periodic wave, and
Walter
you
Russell.
get in Walter Russell. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like for you to open those doors for people like myself to walk through is one thing, but to be like, this is exactly how it's applied 13,000 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it takes the woo woo out of it. Because when I talk about grounding with my clients, like, hey, do you have grounding sheets, or are you wearing blue light blockers? They're like, nah, light frequencies and grounding, that's kind of hippie.
Yeah.
Like, there's tons of research. Like, just look at that, right? And then they'll be like, okay, fine. You're literally doing that with the craziest of the craziest theories of conspiracy theories, if you will.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the thing is, the craziest conspiracy of all the conspiracies is the fact that you and I are sitting here talking to each other right now. Like that's not being addressed. The fact that we exist in the first place, like that's been kind of a pursuit of all of humanity since the beginning of time. And so I think that there's a core in there that both really science heavy people and very spiritual heavy people, they're going towards the same thing. It's like they're all, it's one organization as like
Yeah.
the human species. It's just we have these two camps that are seemingly separate, that they're not, but at its core they're exactly the same. They're talking about things at a consciously, even quantum level now, that they overlap so heavily, it's almost hard not to make the connection now. If you have a decent background in either one, you can really kind of map these things out, and it's very cool to see like people that weren't really into this, kind of that door opening for them, and they have a new passion now, a new hobby, is just like investigating the stuff, and it's fun.
Yeah, and you really do feel like Pinky in the Brain, or like a mad scientist as you're going down the rabbit hole of like I think my intro was the flower of life, Fibonacci, and like maybe acorns or some sort of sunflower seeding, like seeing it in nature, and then seeing as a movement specialist, like this is what I do, and I'm coaching people that nothing is a straight line, right? It's everything's a spiral. You throw a punch, you throw a throw, whatever. It's all spirals. So that was it was almost like a reconnect to spirit science. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Spirit science
yeah.
on YouTube.
I know him. I met him at the Gaia conference. His name's Jordan. He's a cool guy.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
That dude blew my gourd for the first time.
Same.
And it was almost like in the background for 6 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And then it came back in, and you're talking about dodecahedrons, and I was like, oh shit. And it just like clicked back so fast. And then it didn't like help me down the rabbit hole. It literally yanked me down the rabbit hole. And then I saw you talking about Anchor Watt. And so if all these I have so many freaking questions now. The fact that it's only an hour is kind of bullshit, but I'm going to let you slide because you're a busy person.
We can do another. You're good.
If we have so many of these, if there's so many of these little microchip kind of power plant looking things everywhere, have you done, because I've seen that you went to Egypt, and actually I feel like you've been all over now. Is there a rhyme or a reason to why that civilization put them there? Do you believe it's one civilization? Is it a global civilization? Was it multiple different ones with a bunch of ideas that are similar?
I feel like it's probably the same as we are today. Like, you see a skyscraper in China and you see a skyscraper here. You're not like, a whole different species built that, or a whole, the reason why skyscrapers exist in China is because we built them in America first. The Empire State Building kind of set the standard for that, But that doesn't mean that the reason why our Capitol buildings look the way they do is because Greece and Rome did it first, So it's not that they're different in that sense. I think they have their different flavors. It's like a different brand, It's Pepsi versus Coke. They achieve the same results. It's just they have their different flair and their different style, and maybe one is a little bit more effective at doing this thing than the other one. But at their core, I think they're all at least doing something to manipulate consciousness in a way that we don't fully understand yet. And that is very, very evident in Egypt. And when you go there, you start to see a lot of the way that the effort that they went to describe the afterlife is that'll blow your mind more than anything I could ever say. Just walking through one of those places and being like, okay, they had the capability to do this. Why did they write on the walls like a map of how to navigate, a altered conscious state? Like, it had to be so important to them. There had to be such value there that the entire civilization mobilized and built this thing to record this information. Like that, just, you have to stop and think about that for a second, because it's not just decoration. If it was just purely decorative, they would have just put patterns and stuff and on the walls, wallpaper, and like what we do.
Yeah.
They didn't. It was very deep philosophical, esoteric knowledge. Like, you really have to stare at it for a long time to get exactly what they're saying. So there's a level of care and intricacy that went into it that most people overlook and write off as like, these guys were not as, they were definitely not as smart as us. Well, maybe they just took a different path, Maybe we just took we obviously took a very materialistic path. Maybe they were dealing in straight up, conscious dynamics. Like, we're all gonna, at some point, everyone is going to have to experience what happens after this in one form or another. And
if you've ever taken DMT, I'm pretty sold that that's what it's going to be like, Yeah,
it only takes really one of those experiences to kind of sell you on this whole idea, but I think putting some meat behind it is actually one of the craziest things ever, because you'll go into, like, there's a tomb of Tutmosis III, I think. It's in the Valley of the Kings, and usually, they write the deeds of that pharaoh's life on the wall, like what they did or the experiences they had.
Whatever.
This one is wildly different. It is just a map of the stars on the ceiling, and it's not like a geometric map, it's just stars. And then on the walls are specific, you could call them spells, but it looks like they're words that name these deities that would help you and guide you in the afterlife. So it says, like, you're going to meet this guy, here, and then he's going to take you here, and then you're going to go with them, and you're going to go here. And so it's like they've almost made contact with what you would call like the DMT entities, and they opened up a line of communication with them, and then they were able to interact, and those guys would teach them stuff, and then they would come back to Egypt and they put that in the walls. And so it seems like there was like an information exchange, and they were able to manipulate it.
Yeah, that seems more feasible than this guy just really liked himself and wanted a giant tomb for himself. Right?
And you see how extravagant they are?
Yeah,
Like,
especially after looking at one of your videos with the giant stones that are
ones?
ridiculous on the backside
Fallback ones,
of the Sphinx and stuff. Like,
yeah.
and some of them are like tuned, or they ring
Here's the
like
cra-
bells.
Yeah, the obelisk, dude. There's one at Karnak that it fell over, and if you tap on it, it'll resonate. It's got a hum to it, and the craziest thing about that is like we don't really like science now doesn't really understand why certain stones will do that and certain stones won't do it, but they could identify which stones would do that in the quarry and cut out a section of the resonant stone from the quarry and put it in an obelisk just because it rang like a bell. So there's function there. It's not decoration, or they would just pull a rock out of random, wherever, as long as it didn't have a fault in it. But this was deliberately selected because it had a resonance. So that indicates function. That's not a aesthetic element. That is it rings for a reason. Why?
Yes, and that's just like barely scratching the surface of the temple tech that you're like kind of tiptoeing people through. What's the craziest shit you've seen? Because I have my own opinion on the craziest thing I've seen through your page, but I gotta know, like, what's the good stuff?
Well, all right. So my favorite spot was actually not Egypt. I'll give you two. My favorite spot in Egypt is not the Great Pyramid, not the Middle Pyramid. It's the Little Pyramid. The Little Pyramid has the most evidence for like the megalithic stuff on it. It's got like the scoop marks. It looks like it has evidence of how they manipulated the rock. It's got this crazy, like, I don't know. There's a weird vibe when you walk up to it, and you kind of get the feeling like that was what everything was meant to look like there. And so if you do go to Egypt, check out the Little Pyramid before you check out everything. But craziest thing I ever saw in person, I went to Jordan and went to Petra. That is a mind melter. That one will actually melt your brain because
I'm gonna pull up a video or a photo so people can see it in a second, but just like explain what that is for the people that haven't just religiously watched your videos.
So Petra is like the classical definition of it is a place that was created by the Nabateans. They're like desert dwelling people, and so what they did is they built this city inside of it's this giant, basically rock maze. So where Petra used to be the bottom of a ocean long time ago, and when the water receded, it carved out a whole bunch of caverns and stuff. It's just natural formations, earthquakes over time, and in these cracks, they built this city that looks like Greco-Roman. It's got Corinthian columns. It's like it's something that you would see in Europe, and it's in the Middle East in mountains, and it's perfectly carved, absolutely massive. But the craziest thing is, and you should show a picture of the treasury, because this is what really got me. It's like they made this thing, and it's at least 5 stories tall. It's probably taller than that. It's 5 stories tall, but when you go in there, you would expect it to be this like crazy labyrinth inside with all these rooms and cool spaces and stuff. It is not. It is about the size of like a normal house living room in there, perfectly square. And on the inside, it's the craziest designs in there of like the rock, the sandstone, like all of it just looks beautiful, but it's just a perfect square. It doesn't have a great hall. It doesn't have a throne. It doesn't have a room. It doesn't have windows. It doesn't have anything. It's a square. And when you go throughout Petra, you're expecting all.
So
of
like,
this
was
stuff
it a
to be...
battery?
No, I'll tell you what I think here. I'll tell you what I think.
Cool.
I because I explored, I was going around and I was like, okay, at least one of them has to be like they had to get people in here, and this is a crazy looking thing. People had to come in here and do stuff, right? It's way too small on the inside of any of these caves for it to match the exterior, the grandeur of the exterior. But what is really apparent when you go into Petra, and you can't do this in Egypt, is the acoustics. So you go in there, and if you're talking like a normal American talks, we kind of go up and down with our speech, and your voice will hit a certain resonance point, and it will almost echo for like 30 seconds in there. So like it's very, very, very finely tuned to a specific sound that humans can make. So in my opinion, I don't think there was a function for it in terms of those particular spots, other than being a place where you could connect with whatever was communicating through that specific vibratory channel. And maybe you enhanced your perception with some psychedelics or something, I don't know. But that seems to be the case because it was in every culture. But they enhance the perception, and you kind of open the gateway with that resonance to be in communication with these higher intelligences. So it's like an internet address. Like each one of those things was the exterior was a marker for what you're about to experience on the inside, but it wasn't a visual experience. It was you meshing with that particular aspect. It was you becoming a harmonic of that main channel and being able to interact with it, connecting to the internet of their time in the conscious sense, not like ours where it's electromagnetic. It was a directly experienced phenomenon instead of I watched this movie or I talked to this person. So you felt it.
It's like the ether, if you will.
Yeah. So like a different frequency, I guess. It's like it's 5G versus dial-up, but like this is on a different channel.
Yeah, whole different like wavelength, literally. Yeah, that's interesting. That would make sense.
That plays something on your mind. Yeah, it doesn't make their what they did there in the ancient sense of things just doesn't add up to the story, and that was the first time I went overseas, and that kind of was the gateway drug into all this.
I think that more people are concerned with who built things rather than why.
I'm only concerned with the why.
I don't really care who built it, but like it doesn't make sense of why and how. Those two things will literally haunt me until you answer it for me.
Even the how is like secondary to the why for me. I'm like, what compels you to do that?
Well, that's it's the amount of work and planning, and then over the course of how long. Because that you can argue that too. Everyone's going to, but there's a reason everything was built there, and there's a reason that some of them resonate, and there's a reason that some of them don't. There's got to be a reason that the things that they found under your pyramids, like they're yours now, under the pyramids with the columns that look a lot like a spiral.
Yeah.
Anything that spins creates a current. So, like, how deep does that rabbit hole literally go?
And that's people get lost in the weeds there too with the the amount of geometry and precision that is like evident that you could see is not like decorative or for no reason. There's like specific. That's why the computer thing makes so much sense to me, is because there's specific ratios, like the distance between columns or the the radius of a dome, or like the features that it has in there geometrically are very hard to calculate, especially with like cathedrals and stuff like that. They're very, very difficult, even for us right now, to understand why they are like that. And when you put that kind of information, like cathedrals kind of make sense because they're the closest thing we have to our timeline. But when you like take that knowledge and put that on in a time when you're basically just emerging from being like relying on hunting animals to survive, but you can you can already do complex geometry and calculations that are like astrophysicists need computers now to do. Like how make that one make sense to me real quick
Yeah,
before you start saying those guys did it. That's
no
where
way.
we start. It's not who built it. It's like why the fuck was that a priority to them?
Yeah.
When in this time period, if the story is what you say, it appears like they weren't really too concerned with hunting and gathering. It seems like they had so much abundance they could focus on astrophysics.
Yeah, nobody that is focused on survival is doing extracurricular anything. If you've ever been
Go to-
camping, you know.
Just go to any neighborhood that like in your own city. There's always a neighborhood that's just like falling apart. Those guys are they're making ends meet barely, and like,
They're not
they can't even
painting.
keep their house clean. They're not painting.
Yeah.
No, like
Yeah.
you have trash in your front yard. Like go anywhere. This is the saddest thing about Egypt. Like you only see the temples and the pyramids and stuff, but when you drive through it and when you go through Egypt, you'll see what a civilization who does not care about those things does. It's almost a third world country, and I hate it because like the people are so nice and they treated us really respectfully, and you can tell it's just like there's a very unfortunate situation with the government, but
Yep.
but they're not building pyramids. They have the perfect example in the template right over there, and all they're doing is like trying to get by and making sure that like their family's taken care of and stuff.
Right.
Like that's not a concern for the people that have it in their backyard. What makes you think it's a concern for people long ago that that had nothing like that was like their main concern. So
Yeah.
I don't
So-
know, a lot of conflicting stuff.
Are you a Cataclysm event believer? Is that fair
Yeah.
to say? It's
Yeah.
for me, that's the only thing that really makes sense.
I don't know what it was, but yeah, I'm
Yeah.
firmly there.
Could have been a polar shift. Could have been all kinds of crazy shit. Could have been an
Could have
asteroid.
been all of it at the same time.
Could have been,
Yeah.
But to think that there's so many different. All right, so I got to ask you actually, why, if that was the thing, if it was flooding, why are there so many like 12 to 15 story deep cities that are like bubbled in rock?
Well, okay. There's
Like miles of them.
there's a common like misconception that people are not looking at here with like you're talking about Darren Kuyu. I'm assuming
That'd
in
be a
Turkey.
good one, yeah.
Yeah, so Darren Kuyu, if you look at the map of Darren Kuyu, it'd probably be good to pop that image up there as well. It has shafts in there, and those shafts are they do provide air, but when you're talking about like what if it was like a flood situation, it's not like there was like 2 miles of water above you. It was a flood, but water had to go somewhere. It was just displaced temporarily.
Right.
So on the map of Darren Kuyu, those tunnels connect to the underground aquifer, which is a river that flows underground. So essentially, what they are is drains. If you were
would
to
make
say
sense,
those
like
were
an air
sheltered,
bubble.
yeah. So that water, when it's coming, down through those drains, is also pulling air in from up above. So you're still getting ventilation, and the underground flow of water is taking it out and dumping it wherever that underground flow goes. I'm not familiar with the geography, but you're essentially creating like what a bathtub does. Is like creating that little drain, and then you're protecting the surrounding area by funneling that water out that drain. So it doesn't. They didn't necessarily get flooded in there if they did it right. And if you look at pretty much every ancient culture was impressively good at hydraulic engineering.
Yeah.
So Mesoamericans, even in Petra, they had a system that would never that for delivering water that would not. They knew the angles to go. If it goes too fast, you're going to lose water. If it's too flat, it's going to be stagnant. They knew the exact angle to put it at. So they were clearly very advanced at like hydrological engineering. So and then if you're talking about the Americas, you have places like Phoenix. There's like right in the middle of Phoenix. There's one of these places where they have like the little cave systems and stuff. But in the Four Corners, you have massive underground systems and the Hopis legend is that the ant people that were underground taught them how to do things. And when they emerged, then they emerged into this world that we're living in now. That's their creation legend. And it was after the world above was inhospitable to live in, so they had to go below, and then the ant people taught them how to do everything. So there's
That makes sense too.
Yeah, so it seems like there was some, some engineers that were making some shelters maybe for us, our projects or their projects, and we kind of got secondhand information, I guess, from that.
I could swing
That's
that.
where I'm at, kind of. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. I still feel like we got a long ways to go there, but definitely makes more sense than whatever the hell they're trying to say those things were for. So
Yeah. Yeah, I just remember seeing them being like, how the fuck was that built? Like,
and
that's always my question is, how the hell?
and they're perfectly acoustic too. Like the ones in Malta, like the Hypogeum, or the ones in Turkey and Malta are like there's specific rooms that they say were like the churches or their religious centers, but they're always the religious centers are always acoustic for some reason.
Yeah. Which I wanted to get into because I have been diving into these dudes that are researching sound frequencies for healing. And you popped on talking about, maybe it was you, maybe it was one of the other people I follow, but I think it was you talking about resonance and bells and healing properties that people used to know about. Yeah. Um, Go
I
ahead.
don't know if I made one about bills, but definitely made one about the chambers being, potentially, I guess, realignment centers. Not necessarily in the healing in the sense that we would like traditionally think about it today, where you go in and you get, a shot or surgery or a pill. It's more of returning your body to homeostasis through realignment in a
Yeah.
mechanical process, which sound is a, mechanical wave. So if it can potentially do that, then you would not necessarily need to fix the problem. You would reharmonize everything so that it became part of the solution. Whether that's a tumor
Yeah.
or a disease.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. Like in these chambers, knowing that certain frequencies can blast apart uh, tumors, kill parasites, all of the things. Safe to assume if they built that, they probably knew that too. Yeah. Like the study of cymatics is brand new to us. I remember maybe 10, 15 years ago watching the first sand dance around on a
Yeah,
speaker.
yeah.
And now it's come so far that I feel like as soon as I breach the topic, most people check out because they don't really understand what the shit's going on. Um, what came first? You making music or you wanting to play with sand and sound? Like was cymatics first or was the music first?
So I think I watched the same video that you did, like the first cymatic video, that really theatrical one.
Yeah.
Uh, I watched that one. That one really, really got me, and I was like, okay, but I didn't like pursue it. And then I moved to Austin, and obviously got into like the music scene here because that's what you do when you move to Austin. And so I started playing
Music
around
or
with
comedy?
that. It's music, comedy, tattoos, whatever you want. So I started playing around with that, and then electronic music, there's a lot of like fine tuning involved. It's not like playing a guitar where you hit an A and the guitar plays the A. There's a lot of fine tuning. You can bump your frequencies up to, so you don't have to play by the rules. You don't have to tune it to 440. You can tune it to 432. You can tune it to 425, whatever you want. So I was playing around with that, and then you'll notice like the sub frequencies obviously are a big part of bass music. But you'll notice that when you tweak the sound a little bit, whether it's a picture on your wall or a cup on your desk or whatever, they'll start to vibrate and resonate, and then not everything does to the same pitch and stuff. And so I was like, okay, well, how do I do this to resonate with a specific feeling or a specific emotion, and then you start getting into music theory and chords and stuff like that. And so there's something there that you can take a person's mind and create a feeling with sound, right? So if you can do that mentally, then there has to be a physical code to that. My computer brain was like, running wild with this. I'm like, well, can I map these things to shapes? And so I started getting into these like cymatic creators. They were taking really, really high quality pictures of this stuff, and I was like, okay, well, there's clearly like a code here of the frequency mapping to form. And then so that went on for like a couple of years, and I got better at music and more refined and stuff. And then the ancient stuff came into my life, and I started noticing the same patterns I would see there in their art and their architecture and elements.
Which I've never seen, and I've been like not an Egyptologist by freaking any means, but just obsessed with mostly the seven wonders, right? Primarily Egypt, because it's like, yeah, something built that. It's not a waterfall. I've never seen any of the cymatic patterns like that, and you've showed me thousands of them now. It's insane. What do they all mean?
And it's really hard to it's hard to make that connection without knowing like how they work, really, because you see a picture, and if you're not in this world, you can't really put a meaning to the shape. Like I can look at one and I can know, I can't know the exact frequency, because it could be on a very big plate of water, or a very bottle cap, or the frequency is dependent on the shape is dependent on the frequency. So if the wave is going 3 times in one cycle, it's going to create a triangle. So that's how you map it. So a threefold cymatic is going to be triangular every time, no matter what it's going through, as long as that thing is resonating in that frequency. So the shape is mapped to whatever medium it's going through and whatever container that it's in. And so you put those two together, and that's when I was like, okay, we can kind of reverse engineer this then. So if these things are resonating at this frequency, and if they built this temple in a particular way, what exactly was the purpose of that? And again, this is kind of where my computer background comes in, is routing. So that's how you make connections on the internet, and even connections on your internally on your computer is they're frequency based gates. So like certain frequencies can pass, certain frequencies don't, and that's how your computer uses electricity to route and compute, is by modulating frequency, and the frequency of each component, whether it's a pixel in your screen or a key on your keyboard, they all have different registers for different frequencies. So each one can do a specific function. So you map that to a temple. What function is that doing in here? Is it synchronizing some circuitry in here to the circuitry out there, and then that's how you form that connection? That was what was like initially the gateway for me in there, and then I started taking those pictures and then mapping those to like the external structure. So like a lot of the sand stuff lines up with like the pyramids of Mexico and stuff like that. So that those cymatics are useful for mapping like overall layout of things, but the hydro cymatics are useful in like the Hindu temples, for example. They have you see the mandalas everywhere. Yeah. Those things correspond. Each one of those corresponds to a specific frequency too. Like you can make everyone says they're floral patterns, but flowers also correspond to a certain frequency. A flower with 5 petals has a 5-fold frequency. Like it's going to respond more to a frequency that is 5-fold in nature, versus something that is dissonant to it. Its form is going to be more perfect if it's getting that particular frequency. So it's the form is reflected in the frequency is reflected in the form, is what it is. So if that was happening in pulls, that was the connection I was making. And so what is that frequency doing now is the question, and that's where I'm putting a lot more energy now, is like looking into the effects that has on, whether that's a biological system, like playing music for plants, or if that's a human system where if I'm playing like a binaural beat, or if I'm playing a certain song, what does that do to my consciousness? How are my brain waves reacting to that? Is it modulating my state? How do I feel? So looking into a lot of the like deeper interactive aspects of it now to essentially figure out exactly what you're asking. Like I'm not as clueless as most people, but I'm still not an expert by any means at all this. I'm just trying to make all these connections as many as I can.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing a freaking solid job, bro. The whole reason for why is that pattern there just blows my mind. Like, why? What are they saying? Why is that there? Why is that important to that person or that people? And why do they want to make sure it lived literally forever? They didn't build it out of metal. They didn't build it out of like they carved it in fucking stone. You know? Like, why is it so permanent? Why was that so important? And then how the hell didn't we figure it out sooner?
Stone choice. Where were you? Like layers, like whatever. There's a deliberate assembly process. Like if you go to Egypt, there's probably 7 to 8 types of stones that they really worked with in construction, like the different materials, and they all have different, electromagnetic properties, weathering properties, like insulating properties. All of them, if you're working, we try and put our like electrical knowledge to these things, and they're like, well, where's all the metal? Where's all the the stuff that like we would use today? But if you're working in different frequency bands, like you don't have to have necessarily seismic waves move through the ground. That's a different type of.
You don't need a semiconductor like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so if they're doing something different with it, and it's influencing, maybe the seismic waves are influencing the magnetic field. So maybe it's like that's alchemy, it's transmutation, taking a bigger wave, converting it to a smaller wave. We know the Great Pyramid does that. Like if you have certain bands of radio waves concentrate electromagnetic energy internally into the structure, it's not enough to do anything really significant like a power plant would.
Yeah.
But there's an effect going on that is a transmutational effect where you're taking something and transforming it into something else. And I think that was really the main goal there was manipulating the unseen world in whatever way that they were doing for whatever purpose they were doing. It could have been, some could have been for power generation. I don't know that, but some could have been for just connecting to, like what we were talking about earlier, that intelligence that we don't really understand quite yet. But the craziest thing is in Egypt especially is the oldest stuff and the biggest stuff, like the Osirian. It doesn't have anything on it. They didn't put markings on the megalithic stuff. They marked up the stuff after that. They put hieroglyphs on that, but the oldest stuff that you find is completely devoid of any markings at all. It's just really huge stones, and that to me is an indicator of function. Like if you're
Seems
not
like an antenna.
Yeah.
Kinda.
The only time that I would decorate something is if I knew people were going to go in there and have an experience in there. But the bigger stuff, the megalithic stuff, seems more like components. Like they didn't care that it was pretty. They just cared that it worked and that it was going to work for a really long time. And that's why all of that stuff is like really, really, really hard igneous rock, granite, like that stuff, because that was a permanent component they didn't want. For some reason, that had such an important function that it needed to be able to withstand a lot of heat, vibration, whatever was going through it. It needed to be tough. And what the other stuff we see, like the temples in Egypt, is more based on like consciousness and like intelligence, stuff like that. So there's two clearly separate things going on there, and often they get lumped into this one thing. We need to be separating those. We need to be approaching those as two different types of things. They're both impressive, but they seem to have served different functions.
Yeah. And my whole like very amateur theory would be that are you into electroculture? Do you know how electroculture works?
I've looked into it.
That would be my thought, is that they're doing some sort of electromagnetic centering during these specific points. Egypt, maybe like it's sandy now. Maybe that was for their lush environment that they had. I don't know, but it seems like everywhere has them, every continent. So in my thoughts, there was a connectedness like we have today, not like you would imagine pre-Columbus. You know what I mean? In our new time period, I feel like there was some sort of informational exchange or just energy exchange somehow.
Maybe it was both
through the radio waves.
So but what my assumption, or not right now, like there's a bunch of theories you can have on this, and I'm still leaning towards that whole technology was both. It was exchanging energy and information, and there's different methods of doing both. But why would you be doing that in the first place? So if, let's say that the whole planet was inhospitable, right? The fact that we're still thinking that this is like pretty random with the amount of diversity and stuff that we see right now, and like the complexity of life is one, still shocking to me, but two, that also seems to point to a design, and I'm not talking about like a whole, the whole intelligent design concept of religion and stuff like that. I'm talking about a design for the planet. I'm talking about maybe those components, the big ones, the stuff that we don't understand, was to, geometrically balance out the planet so that life was possible. Maybe it was redistributing and dampening places that had, really inhospitable environments, and turning that in and distributing it out in a way that was that life could tune into. You're taking a very chaotic signal and you're making it into something that we can connect to, like the internet. Like there's different channels and addresses and routes. So maybe the planet was in a state of chaos, and that was the way of balancing it out while still, retaining a connection with something that knew much more than we did about this stuff. Because we can genetically engineer stuff. We can do that right now. But on a planetary scale, you need really large components. You need really, really robust systems, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that over, bodies of water. We're seeing it, in shapes that we're using for, transmission, like, or connection in terms of like the internet. We're seeing all of these shapes that are matching up to the functions that we use them for. And I think we're just thinking of it on a different scale. I think it was making things more conducive for life and the evolution of it. And then once we hit that point, we became the caretakers, kind of like the Garden of Eden story, where we learned enough where we can drive evolution to make our own paradise, our own abundant, place that we can live with the information that was initially given that we're still trying to figure out.
Yeah, I can totally sink my teeth into that.
So terraforming essentially, but with a conscious flip to it.
With a hella conscious flip to it.
We're bringing consciousness in as the base there, and then kind of like reverse engineering reality from that conscious perspective. That's what I'm trying to do. Is because reality, in my opinion, is emergent. It's formed after consciousness. Consciousness was first. So maybe that was the routing to that main source where all of that information was available, and then all you have to do is kind of plug a planet in to it, and that intelligence can go into the planet and form life, and that forms experience. And so that's philosophically
how our computers work to the internet.
Precisely. And AI is emerging from that now too. So
exactly, yeah. Which
we have
also
an example.
Crazy. That's insane. That is crazy. I've seen The Matrix. I've seen The Terminator. I know how this goes. It's not great.
I got the warnings. Right.
Yeah. No, it's not good. Not great. So, with your 5, 6, how many books, including the ebooks and the what was it? The Hidden History. I think that one was like the
that was an ebook.
Interactive one.
Yes. So I kind of everyone's got really interested in like certain things that I was talking about, and I started just making a product for each one of those interests, and it got really confusing. People are asking, where do I read first? What do I do? And so I've written 5, but this new one, Cryptex, is
the Cryptex.
Cryptex, yeah, it's the combination of pretty much everything so far in a streamlined format, end to end, including temple science, that kind of like gives this exactly what we were talking about. This theory, it gives it a little bit of legs, and I included as many studies and stuff as possible in that one. I tried to incorporate all the elements from the other ones. It's pretty lengthy, but I feel like it's the best shot I've had so far at making this all make sense. I didn't like the fragmentation of all my previous work, so I'm trying to consolidate all of that, and that's what Cryptex is.
To the accumulative that you were discussing before, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, the real question is, how long did that actually take you?
That is a loaded question.
I know, man, because
to acquire,
I know it goes all the way back to your computer school. So
yeah, so I mean, it didn't take really too long to write, because the way my system works is I'll have like a epiphany, or I make a connection and I throw out my phone, and so I have these random ideas in my phone, and I'll push them to a Google Doc or something. I'll organize them within a coherent theme, and then I'll make them, I'll write it so that it sounds like it flows well, even though they were kind of separate ideas. And then I throw that into a book template. And then once that in my head makes enough sense to be released, that's when I release a product. And so this one is the culmination of 4 times doing that process, and then I merged them all into this one, and then did the same thing with the entire book. So it all builds off of itself. But I mean, the acquisition, I've been in this this weird space for at least a decade of investigation. But in terms of like practice and stuff, I've been like heavily into this content for like 6 years. So aggregate of all my knowledge, about 10, this specific for about 6, and then actively putting it into, something that is tangible for people, and aligning that in a way that makes sense since I started the channel. That's really, so I would say this is really like the culmination of all my social media stuff is Cryptex.
Yeah.
Of everything
Okay.
I post about is in there. If you like something that I've ever posted about, it's in that one.
It's hefty. You're not wrong. It's
Yeah.
thick. She girthy.
Yeah.
She
I'm
thick,
dreading
man.
the printing process for this one. We're working on physical copies now for anyone that was asking. But yeah, that's always a pain in the ass. So
Dude, it's gonna be so worth it. I'm gonna be one
Yeah.
of those guys that buys it and makes you print one more.
yeah.
I just don't know how insane your brain has to be to start the dive as well as the connection. I don't mean insane like a beautiful mind, like wow, he's smart but he's crazy. Just like the neural web that you have to have
It's
from
more
a
the weight.
scientist. Like, dude, it's crazy.
It's more the weight of like, I don't want to say it's like an existential crisis sometimes, but it kind of is. Like when if there's a connection that is really really deep, sometimes I won't dive into it like that hard, because I'm like,
Too much.
no way, no way. Yeah, and I don't want to think about it, but I do, because like we're not really meant to understand everything. That's why in my opinion, that's why we're here, is like to have this limited experience, but we can really feel it, instead of like a very broad experience of everything, but the details kind of get overlooked. We're here to like understand some micro details about this specific aspect of reality, and sometimes I have to pump the brakes a little bit if I go to metaphysical and try to understand like a lot of the dynamics of consciousness and stuff like that. It naturally is going to give you anxiety a little bit, because these are huge concepts that you're really not typically thinking about in day-to-day life. So finding the balance there kind of has been the only struggle I've had with the account, is really finding the way to make it fun still while talking about some very serious stuff. And there are times when I have to like take a little break, because obviously social media is social media, but people will have some very deep experiences and they'll ask me about it and stuff, and I don't know if I'm qualified to even help people in that aspect, but I know that I may be the only one that's ringing a bell inside of them and resonating. And so the weight of that responsibility has gotten a little bit bigger over the years, just because my following has grown a lot, and a lot of people say that I truly do help them in a way that I sometimes don't even understand. So it's very cool, and I'm very appreciative of all of it. It just kind of, it is a little heavy when you're trying to take those big concepts and bring them into reality and connect them in a way that makes sense for the average person.
Was that your original goal, was to try and not help people, but like have other idiots like myself understand what you're going through and learning? Was that the goal of Bassforge, or was it just like I want to make some music and need a place to post my insane thoughts? Yeah.
Actually, it's called Bassforge because I was selling music templates of like, I would make a song in Ableton and I would sell the template of the song I made to help people learn music. And then I started explaining music concepts, and then people started resonating with music concepts. And then I was like, fuck it, I'll try something else. And then I, reached out into the
Nerdier.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, a little
The other
deeper.
stuff that I was into, and then people were like, that makes sense, keep going. And so it kind of built off of that. So there was never an intention to like to be this person. It's just, I think I found a skill that I didn't know that I had, and I'm kind of just running with it and letting my intuition kind of guide me where it needs to go. And I try to stay as balanced as possible. Obviously, I have my own particular beliefs, but I try and reach as many people as possible and not offend, but also uplift people that have been historically repressed and stuff, especially these cultures that aren't getting a lot of attention, or they got kind of ravaged in the last couple centuries by people that didn't have their best intentions, so there's a lot of goals that I do have with it. If I can raise awareness for that, then that's a high priority for me, is to to make these people feel like they're heard and make their accomplishments feel more significant than what the world makes them out to be. But overall, I truly just want to there's this aura on the internet of like, life sucks, it's prison, blah blah blah, I gotta go to work, blah blah blah. And I'm trying to like shift that. If I can only shift it a millimeter in the direction of, hey, you're still experiencing something that's absolutely insane, and you have to realize
probability's pretty low.
How interconnected everything is, and like the just sheer amount of magical shit that happens on a day-to-day basis. Like, if I can just encourage people to take 5 minutes out of their day, or even 2 minutes on one of my videos, to make that connection, I feel like that's a win just for society, But selfishly, I would like more people to be a little bit more conscious with everything, because I do also feel like we're in a lower point in society that could be fixed just with a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of like epiphany about a certain thing could change the way someone goes about their life. And I feel like that's also important.
Yeah, no, absolutely, dude. I think what you're doing is sweet. I know that. I'm bought in all the way. It's kind of one of those things where you're getting on the bus and you have no idea where the stop's going to be.
Yep.
But I'm along for the ride, man. Let's go. It's like every time you make a new post with a new finding, that even if it's not brand new, let's say it was a 6-month-old finding, and you're like, okay, I'm going to make this post up. It's still better than when I read the freaking study in the first place. Like, damn, this is so good. And I'm up on time. I have a whole outside of this world conversation to have with you that has to do with space time and quite literally time breathing. You could probably follow where that would go, and that is its own rabbit hole. The space cube, the space cube, if you will. I would love to. You're down in, where are you? Are you in Austin? Did you say that?
Yep.
You're like down by Joe Rogan.
I am, yeah.
I should find you on his podcast soon, dude.
I'm trying to get his attention for a fucking year now.
Dude, you know what? You have a big enough following. You could have us all just message his Instagram.
I might call in
I would do that.
I might call in a favor from the audience here in the next couple months. We'll see.
I think everybody would do that. Like,
I think they would.
Graham Hancock threw us a bone, but there's people like you or like me that have already been there, reading it before that was our first introduction. So I feel like he needs to go like one step deeper, which would be,
it's right there.
Dude, just go knock on his door.
That's right there.
Hey man, you like to shoot bows? Like, I will today.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, whatever it takes.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I want to throw all of your information out there, because like obviously we have vastly different audiences.